Good evening. It's September the 11th, 2018. This is Grant Cameron. You're listening to the Cameron Files. Thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen. Tonight we have a jet pilot, so fasten your seatbelts. We're definitely going to go very, very fast. My guest, Steve Murillo, attended the United States Naval Academy, where he received his Bachelor of Science degree in Systems Engineering in 1982. He was commissioned an officer in the Marine Corps, attended flight school, and served 7 years of active duty as a jet pilot and maintenance officer for his squadron. After the Marine Corps, he went to TRW, where he became the power systems engineer for a satellite program known as TDRSS, Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System Flight 7. In 2001, Murillo became the state director of MUFON Los Angeles, where he held this post for 13 years, conducting field investigations and monthly meetings until June of 2013. Steve now heads up UPARS LA, the UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Los Angeles, where I had the honor to speak earlier this year. Once a month, UPARS LA showcases world-renowned experts in the field of ufology, the paranormal, cryptozoology, conspiracy, and more. His meetings are held on the third Tuesday of the month in Studio City, California. You can find more information at www.uparsla.org. And we're going to start with his latest project. We're going to start talking to him tonight. His latest project is his biggest to date and a true labor of love. Steve is one of the founders of a social media platform called OnStellar, built specifically for the UFO, paranormal, and ascension communities. Its purpose is to employ wisdom of its users to discover the truth behind the phenomena. OnStellar is a collaborative social media platform that does not track user data, does not censor, and does not sell ads. OnStellar is truly powered by the people. In the future, OnStellar will employ blockchain technology, giving users a safe, secure way to monetize their interactions, exchanging OnStellar tokens that will have real dollar value for products and services. Good evening, Steve. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Good evening, Grant. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. How's my voice? Too loud? I usually speak too loud.
No, you're coming across just fantastic. I think they got adjusted to the other end. It's coming across great for me. Good. Let's start with OnStellar. You talked to me when I was there about this. You worked on this with Steve Murillo, correct? Explain how this started and what exactly this is all about for people.
Okay, so I've been involved in UFOs and paranormal for a long time, mostly ufology since about 2001 when I had a sighting. And as you pointed out in the very, very warm introduction, thank you. I've headed up MUFON Los Angeles for 13 years. Each month we'd have a speaker come in. It was Bud Hopkins, it was Linda Moulton Howe, it was all these different people that you know and I know, Richard Dolan. Yeah. Anyway, so, steeped in the UFO community for all that time, in 2013, we became UPARS, UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Los Angeles, because we realized that there's more to ufology than just nuts and bolts. We saw other things occurring with the people we interviewed, with the investigations we went out on. So we had to leave MUFON and became UPARS. So, this idea about, let's talk about OnStellar. OnStellar is a labor of love. It's myself, a guy named Udesh Waragoda, who is our Chief Technology Officer. Scott Leslie, he's the CEO and primary funder of the project, very, very kind man. And there are others involved as well. And the purpose of OnStellar was to create a social media platform where people can go to discuss these sorts of topics and not have any fear of ridicule, not, you know what I mean? What I find among the UFO and paranormal communities, the ascension communities, they're very intelligent people. Most of them are very, very bright, and it's for that reason that they're able to examine topics that most people like poo-poo or put aside. Were it not for my sighting, I had a pretty significant sighting in 2001. Were it not for that, I'd probably be one of, I wouldn't be into this stuff, but
yeah.
When somebody has a profound experience like I did and like many other people have had, it sets you on this course. It kind of sparks a fire, but I think there are other things going on. And the people that come to my meetings and meetings like it all across the country that go in month in, month out, they go to all the conventions and all that. It's because they've had an experience that puts a fire in them. They know there's something more to this world, to this universe, this planet than what they've been told their whole lives. So OnStiller is a place for people to gather to discuss this sort of stuff. And you mentioned a lot of interesting things. I want to let the people know who are using OnStiller, and even if you're not using OnStiller now yet, onstiller.com, we're migrating to a new software platform very soon. And in fact, it's a little bit behind schedule, but it will make OnStiller even more robust. It'll be less prone to attack. It'll be easier to add things to later on. So we have a lot of plans for OnStiller, and it's going great. We love the feedback we're getting. I haven't had any negative feedback. Maybe that's because people are being polite, but I mean, people leave comments. So OnStiller is based on wisdom of the crowd, as you introduced. And what that means basically is people publish articles. You write an article on OnStiller, and people will read that article, view it. If they like it, they'll upvote it. If they don't like it, they'll downvote it or leave it alone. And the system, will decide what tiles kind of move up into the OnStiller world of trending. So trending things are things that are becoming popular with people, all across the OnStiller universe. But the topics cover UFOs, cryptozoology, ascension, spiritual awakening, free energy, you name it, and it's in there. And we'd love to have your contributions, by the way, Grant.
Yeah, I have somebody that does this stuff for me, so I'm going to make sure we get going. I've always had trouble. Explain to me the difference between Facebook, which I've had a little bit of interaction when you post stuff, and then you get these troll guys.
Sure.
How do you avoid that kind of stuff? What's the difference between you and Facebook?
Okay, so a lot of things. First of all, we do not track user data, so I have no idea where you're from, who, when you log on. We don't track any of that stuff. We don't know what your buying habits are. Facebook tracks all that stuff and more. They know how old you are. They know what you're interested in. They track your, they track what you view, and then they use that information for people that are advertising products and services. So they sell that information. We don't do that at all. So that's not what OnStiller's for. We're not tracking data, and we're not selling ads. So it's a very kind of grassroots feeling when you get on OnStiller. There are no ads where, on the right-hand margin you see somebody advertising whatever, if you're into cameras, if you're into watches, all that kind of stuff. So in addition, we're designing the system, and we've been waiting for, we're going to be laying in something called blockchain technology, and I'm sure many of your people have heard of blockchain. They're not exactly sure what it is, but it is basically primarily the security analog software that keeps cryptocurrency secure and not reproducible. It also keeps transactions secure and not reproducible. So once we lay in the blockchain technology, we have tokens that are in OnStiller. When you join OnStiller, you get a few tokens, and that's great. But you'll be able to transact with those tokens if you so choose. They will eventually have dollar value. Right now, they do not. Also coming up, I should say, very soon, we're going to have a store built into OnStiller. So if you're a merchant, if you're selling, say, for example, CBD oil, one of my favorite OnStiller users is a great guy. He posts a lot of good articles, not just on CBD, but other things. But CBD is his business. So he'll be able to actually sell CBD oil online on OnStiller and accept either dollars, PayPal, credit card, or even tokens, OnStiller tokens. So that's all coming up very soon. I'd say within the next 30 days, the new platform will be up, the store will be up. We're going to install a new chat. The chat will be more robust. You'll be able to do group chat, all these different things. So yeah, we're working on OnStiller every day.
Beautiful. I'll get my my assistants that do the magic stuff for me. I'm getting a little old, but they'll do this because that's the kind of stuff they're into. On this new platform, have you had any sort of big stories that I might have not seen elsewhere?
No, well, I can't say that. Yes, we have had big stories. For example, when things come out, say about To the Stars Academy,
Okay.
The people that are very tuned into that stuff are OnStiller users. You know what I mean? That's the group, right? That's paying attention to all this stuff. So big stories about, say, Luis Elizondo releases a letter, I think last week. That was posted immediately on OnStiller.
Okay, is this the resignation letter?
Yeah, yes, the resignation letter. Jimmy Church posted, I believe. So Jimmy Church is a great guy. He posts on OnStiller all the time. All of his the Fadernauts are on there. They're very, very loyal, and they're great people, and they post on OnStiller. So all these different people are using this platform, including and then many, of course, of the people who are out there talking about ufology. For example, Billy Carter, he posts a lot. Billy Carson, I'm sorry. Billy Carson posts a lot on OnStiller, and and a lot of his people follow him, and so they get involved. So it's pretty cool.
Sounds exciting. Is the TTSA? Do you think they're linked in there?
They may be paying. They may be watching.
Watching, yeah.
They may be watching. I don't know.
Yeah, getting to the Elizondo letter, I was going to ask you about that because I'm sort of in the middle of this thing. I just can't figure out what the heck is going on. There's a Elizondo resignation letter without the date on it, which, of course, is an immediate red flag.
Right.
Then there's this list of programs, these 37 programs that Hal put off contracted out, which Hal is now saying the list is not correct. That was leaked in this thing. It was supposed to come off of Mellon's website, and there's a bunch of stuff. There's some DVDs. I don't know what you've seen, but it's a bizarre story because I know one of the guys who has the documents, and there's a lot of names in the documents he doesn't want to release, and I'm going like, this is just bizarre. Nobody's talking about it. Somebody is definitely floating this thing into the UFO community.
Yeah.
And so what's your reaction to? I remember one interview talked about Lou Elizondo. So what do you think about the whole? Let's go to the stars. And then I want to go to your sighting because that is the most important thing I want to talk about. But what do you think is really going on here with this To the Stars?
To the Stars Academy almost seems like a soft disclosure or PR move, or like let's take a pulse and measure the response of the community, not just the UFO community, but primarily the public. And the public, it's like no big deal. They're not even paying attention. They could care less. It took about 14 days for them to forget about the December 16th release. When people who are not into this subject start talking to me about ufology because they know I'm in it, they ask what makes you think it's real and stuff like it. Well, on December 16th when New York Times came out with that article and they released the Navy footage, and I can see it in their eyes. They don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. You know what I mean? They're like, what? You can see it in their eyes. They had no idea, even though it was on CNN and all the big ones, and there was a New York Times article. Most of these people aren't paying attention like that, and even if they heard about it, they don't really care because it's always been marginalized to the point where they're taught to just ignore it. Somebody talks about UFOs, they're just going to ignore it or laugh about it and move on with their day. So the Luis Elizondo letter that came out last week, I was kind of it was all wrong. You know what I mean? It just didn't feel right. It felt like it was like a feed. It felt like a misdirection. And it just didn't seem genuine. And it almost seemed like something they're just putting out there to keep people interested in To the Stars Academy. You know what I mean? To keep themselves relevant, kind of like what a troll does, but in sort of a softer way. So that's kind of my feeling on it. I don't know how effective TTSA will be in the end. I don't know if they were using Tom DeLonge as just a tool to take the pulse, to take the temperature. I would feel bad for Tom about that because I think he was he is genuinely interested in getting to the crux of the matter. But I think that he may have been manipulated, and just the way he got introduced into everything was kind of hokey. I've listened to your show too, and I agree with you. It's a little bit weird. And go ahead.
Yeah, have you had any contacts? Because you're in the LA area, a lot of these guys will cycle through there, like DeLonge's in San Diego. Have you had any contacts in your, say,
I have not.
15 years with any of these guys?
No, not with DeLonge. I know Jimmy Church was in contact with Tom DeLonge. They were exchanging texts and things when it first happened, but I don't know if that's still going on. The man that I've always wanted to talk to about this whole thing is Hal. And I think you have connections with him, do you not?
I've had the odd correspondence. If you know Hal, like for example, the Holloman Air Force Base film, I was one of the people that worked on this for years, and he found out I was working on it, and he would contact me about that. Or when I got the idea that the left brain was involved in paranormal phenomena, that if you can shut down the left rational analytical mind, you could you can tap into this field of whether it's psychic phenomena, out-of-body experiences, all this kind of stuff. And so I would contact Hal, and I'd say, I've got this idea about the left brain. Did you guys, when you were doing the remote, did you get this connection? And he would just go, he'd write back, and he's always very, very short. He just says, read chapter 6. So Hal has very, very few words. So he'll basically, or when he learned that I had Art Lundahl. Art Lundahl was the guy, if you know, right now it's Pandolfi, and before him was Kit Green. Before that was this Arthur Lundahl in the 50s and 60s, who was supposed to be the head CIA guy for UFOs. I had a collection of material and of letters that he had written. And of course, Hal wrote me and he said, I understand you got a collection. Could you send me the collection? So he knows all the importance. I agree with you. I mean, he is, and to me, he's an honest guy that, he's in his 80s or whatever. I mean, why would this guy be playing games? Right. I mean, he's just desperate to try to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. No, he's been a pioneer, no doubt. And it would be awesome to have him on your show. I mean, it would be I would love to hear that guy just talk to you for a while, maybe a half hour. It doesn't matter. I just love that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that, I think you agree with me that, and that's why I say, like with To the Stars, if you look at all the material they've released, it's all got the same problem. Like the Elizondo Letter is missing the date. The executive summary is missing the heading and the headers and the footers. The videos, you can't tell where they're coming from. And Lou Elizondo says they're coming from the government, and they say, well, who's the government? He said, well, you'd have to ask the government. That kind of thing. There's nothing that's nailed down. Even the name of the program, you can't nail down. They say there's no records. And it's always this plausible deniability. You sort of throw the stuff out there, and it bounces around, and nobody can confirm it.
Right. But what's funny about all of that? Everything that you mentioned there is so easy to discover if you just look. You know what I mean? These are not things that are buried 3 layers deep. These are like right on the surface things. I mean, the balloon, the UFO that they released as their first picture, and it turns out to be a freaking Mylar balloon, and all these different things. It's almost like it's purpose. They're doing this on purpose just to see, is anybody really paying attention? Yeah. It's almost like that. It's like, you're going to put this in front of me and expect me to buy into it? Or how about the audio that goes along with the video?
Yeah,
it doesn't. They don't jive. And by the way, the video was not shot by Faber. David. That was not his video.
Wow,
I'm told. So
let me ask you a question about the video, because you were a jet pilot. The one thing I brought up and asked John Lear about. And that was the vacuum cleaner going in the background. And they said it was this wind noise. And to me, the understanding was that if you're a fighter pilot, you've got oxygen, and that's cut off. So do you get that kind of wind noise when you're in a jet? With
no, you don't get that. No, you don't.
Yeah, because and both videos had it. The one was shot in 2015, or it was 2015, and one was in 2004, and you have the same vacuum cleaner going in the background. And that's what it's.
Right. It's almost like somebody who's never been a pilot created it, and they thought, I need to put some background noise in here. What do I do? Oh yeah. It's almost
or to me, it's like they need to change it. So it's and I may be wrong. I think it's a legitimate video, but what you do is like you take off the date from Lou Elizondo's letter, you take off the headings from the other document, and now it's a phony document. It's not the real thing. So if you put a noise in the background, you can say, this is not a classified video, or because it's not the same video. Maybe that's what I'm thinking they're doing. They're making these slight little adjustments
in order
to release it. So they're staying outside, because you've probably worked with classified, in your jobs. I mean, I'm always suspicious of whistleblowers. I mean, in my first question, I've never had a whistleblower. I don't know if you ever had. I've never in 43 years ever had a whistleblower come to me, and probably because they know the first question I'd ask them is, why are you not in jail? I mean, did you not, take an oath to obey the law and uphold the Constitution? Like, what are you telling me the most classified stuff? And yet you have these whistleblowers that are running around claiming that they've got, security clearances higher than the president, and they're going to tell you all the top secret stuff. And so that's what I think, my impression, that they're trying to avoid that classified thing. They know how to walk around.
That's a very good, plausible explanation. I think, take the important stuff off, make it a little bit different, and then put it out there so you don't have to worry about sanctions later.
Because I worked back in the 80s. I was with Bill Moore, who was in L.A., and I knew Bill Moore very well. He actually helped me with my investigation. I was chasing around the former president of Penn State University, and when he was first contacted, it was exactly the same as Tom Long. No matter what they deny or whatever, it's exactly the same. He was contacted because he made Roswell famous. He was the guy that came out with the Roswell incident, and before nobody even knew what the word Roswell was, and he had he had all these witnesses, and he had the security manager, the security guy at the base there and stuff like that, and so he was like, I think he sold 1 million copies of the book. It was like, he was a very famous guy.
Wow.
And so they contacted him, I think on 6 days into his book tour, and they said, "You're the only guy that knows what you're talking about." And Bill went, "Yeah, that's true." And then a couple days later, another phone call. "You only guy knows what you're talking about. We need to talk to you." And basically they said to him, "We're going to give you the material, and some of it's going to be true and some of it's going to be false, and it's up to you to figure out which is which." And Bill went, "Oh yeah, I can figure that out. I mean, I can separate the wheat from the chaff. I'm a smart guy." And that's what they do. So, this is the same game they were playing in the 1980s. So you release release MJ12 document or the Aquarius document, whatever, and it's got real material in it.
Yeah.
But it's fake. So then you can immediately say it's a phony document. It's a hoax or whatever. And the stuff, almost like the Area 51 that you went to, and I'll have to ask you about that. The Area 51 thing. So Lazar probably did go on the base, and when he walks out, everybody yells hoax and everybody runs away, and the story dies. But everybody realizes, oh, something's going on in Area 51. Before that, nobody knew anything about Area 51. They didn't even know it existed.
Right. So is that a process of soft disclosure, or is that them? Like, in other words, why go through all this trouble?
I think they're avoiding the classified aspect of the thing. They're doing the plausible deniability, because it's the old idea. If you want to disclose, you could just stand up and tell people what's going on. So you're not disclosing, but you're not covering up. Because I live in Canada, and I always bring this up because this whole thing that's going on is basically an American phenomenon. It does not happen in Canada. People ask me, because I did the U.S. presidents for so many years, they say, "What's going on in Canada?" And I go, "I haven't got the foggiest notion." The Canadian government may not even know what a UFO is. I don't know, because they don't talk about it. And that's the whole thing, is if you're in Australia or England or Canada, you just don't talk about it, and the story goes away. So why do you keep talking about it? It's like, so you're not covering up, because you just shut up and quit talking about it, and you're not disclosing, because then you'd stand up and talk about it. So they're doing this sort of thing where they're gradually leaking the story, and nobody can confirm the story. And you know what it's like. Everybody walks away from the story, but everybody knows the story. Everybody knows about Area 51.
Sure.
They know all these different stories that come out about documents and stuff. And again, I think they're doing the same thing. And it's almost like now they're doing it on steroids. They're much better at doing it. This latest effort at what they're doing in terms of, like, what I bring up is what people forget. Everybody talks about the New York Times article. It wasn't the New York Times. It was the New York Times, Washington Post, and Politico, all three major newspapers, who never did UFO articles, who all went on the same morning. With a story that took them 2 months to research, and the guy from the Washington Post had 2 Pulitzer Prizes. So you had all these guys. It was a coordinated effort, and yet when you take a look at the New York Times, the title they were given was the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, but the Washington Post and Politico were told it was Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. So they were told 2 different names, and you can see they're feeding this stuff. So they feed Steve one piece, they feed me another piece, and then me and Steve are fighting about who's scamming the community. And meanwhile, the story's bouncing around and nobody can confirm it, but people start talking about it.
So the question is why, though? See, so all of this leads to an end game, right? Are we in the short strokes, or are we still,
Well, I think I would agree with the To the Stars aspect that I've heard, and I think it even comes. I think I've heard it. Hal is one of the briefers. Is that they're trying to make a move to bypass the UFO community? That's what I said. They'd fire the UFO community. They couldn't care less what you and I think about it.
Oh no, they'll all be
the New York
experts,
Times,
and it will be totally marginal.
And they're going to the Senate. They're trying to get funding. Okay. So it's the old deal in Washington that, if you say, okay, UFOs are real and I think we should study it, they'll all look at you like, who cares? Because it's not in anybody's sort of ballpark. If you're in the education department, it's got nothing to do with you, and it doesn't have anything to do with anybody. But if you can say it's a threat, and you go to the Defense Department, then you get some money. So I think that's what they're doing. That's why they're pushing the threat thing. Is they're trying to get funding for the UFO to study this UFO thing, which normally you couldn't get because nobody wants to touch it. It's got nothing to do with me. The only way you can do it is to put this sort of threat thing. So I think they're basically pushing for Congress. And somebody has said they've got, $500 million already. But it does sound true that they are doing some sort of briefing. But then it may be like everything else in Washington, that even if it's a good idea, like child cancer research or whatever, they're going to kick it down. You're going to have the Republicans and the Democrats fighting, and it's not going to go anywhere. They may talk about it in Congress, but it's another thing to talk about it in Congress. It's another thing to actually make it come out the other end.
Yeah. So Elizondo's, by that, along that line of thinking, Elizondo's letter had a lot of that in it, right? Yeah. We need to assess this threat. This is a threat. That was in there. So maybe that's exactly what it is, Grant. Maybe that's what they're doing, is they're lining themselves up for money down the road. Yeah. And it's not going to be $500 million. I guarantee you that. I mean, we've already got Trump launching the Space Force. I love that Space Force. I love it. But so maybe that's all part of it, and maybe there's going to, if Space Force is not for exploring peacefully in space. That's for, that's defense. That's military. You know what I mean? That's weaponry in space. That's what that's all about. So
And in the end, I think it really doesn't really matter. I mean, people always say, when's disclosure coming in? I'm going to say, what difference does it make? You're going to get off your rear end and do something if disclosure comes? I mean, everybody's waiting for some external force to change. And that's why I think you're going down the same road as me when you started the UPARS idea, is that you got to talk to the sort of the experiencers, the people who are interacting with this thing, that these people are being given material. So let's go to your sighting, because your sighting is pretty interesting sighting, because you've only been in this for 15, 16, 17 years, something like that.
Yep, like 17 years. Yep. May of 2001 is when I had my major sighting.
And were you a pilot then, or were you a TRW?
I was not. No, I was out. No, I got out of TRW even in the early '90s, and I became a real estate mortgage guy in California. I'm here in Manhattan Beach. Yeah. So I've been, I'm well into my real estate mortgage business at that point, and I'm on the rooftop deck of my house looking at the ocean, and these things fly over in formation. So it kind of looked military to me, right? At first I thought they were seagulls. Then it turns out they're not seagulls. It's at 9:30 at night. It's pitch black, and I'm thinking, why is somebody shining a spotlight on seagulls? They're so bright. Who cares about seagulls? And here they are, and they're over my head, and they're not seagulls at all, but they're these triangular things. And they do some maneuvers and stuff, and they were low. These things were probably, the size of a car a block away, something like that. They were good size. They were all lit. And it wasn't, later on I discovered this, but I didn't realize it at the time. At the time, I was, I had my military background. They did some maneuvers that are not possible for a normal jet, Yeah. And, clearly illustrated to me the fact that they're not obeying the laws of gravity. And then they took off. So it just blew my mind. Jumped out of the hot tub, ran downstairs screaming at my wife and all that, and got online and tried to figure out what I just saw. I called tower, I called approach, LAX, because we're near LAX. And they said, no, we don't have anything on radar. I was like, okay. So I filed a report on, just coincidentally, I pulled up a MUFON LA, report thing on Netscape and filled it out. And that's how I got involved in ufology. And I started attending their meetings monthly, and next thing you know, I'm on the board. Next thing you know, after that, shortly thereafter, I'm in charge of it. And the guy who was in charge, a guy named Don Waldrop, moved to Florida, and he wanted to get. He was done. He was retired, and he just left. So I took over, and we've been doing it ever since. But what I was going back to in the sighting that I didn't realize was, and this is very common, with people who have these kinds of experiences, you sort of get this download of information that you're not aware of. It's subliminal or subconscious. It goes right to your subconscious, I think. And that's what causes that fire. You know what I mean? That's what causes that obsession. Because after that, I literally just got a hold of every book I could read on the topic. You know what I mean? I just like any book. Yeah.
And that's an important point. I think we have to point out to people, because you mentioned some weird stuff, like with your wife. Explain what happens to your wife.
Oh, well, you mean that during that sighting?
Yeah, where they take her out of the picture. Yeah,
this is common. Very common. So a lot of times a sighting is meant for only one person. That sounds kind of egotistical, but it's true.
Yeah.
So the custom was we'd go up to the hot tub with our glasses of wine, sit there and enjoy the hot tub, right? Look at the stars. So I go up she's walking me up. I'd been doing karate that night, so I was pretty beat up, and I was kind of out of it a little bit. So she hands me my glass of wine. I'm in the hot tub. She goes, "Oh, I forgot mine." And then she turns around and goes downstairs. And that's when it happened. And that's when it always happens. It's not always, but it's very, very common to hear that sort of story from an experiencer. The spouse is made to turn away. The spouse is switched off. The spouse, here's a crazy story I've never told, actually. It's kind of weird. When I was in my late 20s, I'd just gotten out of the military. I was working at Terra W, and I was dating this girl. She's very attractive. And, after about 2 or 3 dates, she sort of decided to open up and started telling me about abduction experiences.
Wow.
Yeah. After it was like just 2 or 3 dates. I didn't know her well. I mean, didn't know her that well.
Yeah.
And but she told me this one story. She grew up in Long Island. She was at her girlfriend's house. They had a little house in the country, and a blue orb appears in front of them in the front yard area. They're in kind of like the forest, but the whole family was out on the porch enjoying the evening. It was a summer evening, and this blue light appears, and it flies towards them, and as it's getting closer, she goes to scream, but nothing comes out. And then she looks from side to side at everybody else to see what their reaction is, and they're all frozen. She said they're just literally like statues.
Wow.
Yeah. So now imagine me, a guy who just got out of the military, just got out of flying jets. And I thought, this girl is crazy. The Flintstone feet start going. And that relationship got terminated early, but it's a shame because I didn't know. But that's such a common thing.
Yeah. That's one story that Lennon tells. According to Uri Geller, and everybody doubts the Uri Geller story, but it has that component. Uri Geller's told a story by John Lennon that he wakes up in the middle of the night. And Yoko Ono's there, and he's trying to wake up Yoko. He can't wake her up, and there's light coming from under the door and through the keyhole and stuff. And he goes to the door, and these bug creatures are there. It's all lit up and stuff. And they give him this object that Uri Geller claims he has. And it's not the same thing. So you say, Uri's making up, but you and I know that component. Oh yeah, right. The other person shut off. This is not something somebody's going to make up. And there's only a few people who would make it. So do you think it was a random event? That's the whole thing. I mean, do you think this was
my sighting? Do I think it was random? No, I don't think so. No, given all that I've studied, all the people that I've interviewed and all that, no, absolutely not random at all. That was it happened exactly that way at that exact moment. And I hate to say it for me, but on me. Let's just say that. It's not about me. It's not. There are a lot of people going through the same thing. You know what I mean? But it always happens for that.
Because they make a move. There's 5 of them, and they make a second move. They fly over because you're a pilot, so they do that little maneuver.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They flew over my head in military formation, right? One in the lead, two trail on each side, so a little triangular formation. And then as I'm following them from west to east over my head, and I'm just jaw agape, then 3 of them split off across the sky and slide. They don't jink like a jet. A jet has to turn and use the air. These things just slid across the sky like they were on rails and got at least 2 miles separation in just seconds. And the other 2 were continuing on in the straight course. And then after 3 or 4 seconds, the 2 that got left behind just slid in at a very high rate of speed and perfectly joined up with the other 3. And then, boom, it was like they hit a Stargate or something. They're just gone. Yeah. And that's the maneuver that I saw that told me, oh, these are not from around here.
And it's not like they're doing some sort of thing that they're picking up somebody or doing something. It's like it's almost done to say, watch this, and they make the move. Because I remember the second time I had my sighting in 75, and in 75, and a lot of people around don't realize this. In 75, you could see a UFO, and people would think you're sort of crazy, but it's not the end of the world. But if you saw 2 UFOs, then you were definitely crazy. Because I remember Betty Hill. When Betty Hill, I heard, because I had some contact with her back then, and she was mentioning that she was seeing these things in the backyard. They were there all the time. And even I thought Betty Hill, maybe she's making up a story. She's just crazy. Nobody sees it. And that's the thing. It was always seen as a random event.
I did not know that about Betty Hill. Wait, was that before or after the primary sighting?
After the primary sighting. And
Okay.
even I had the doubts. I thought, no. You don't have all these sightings. She's seeing them all the time and stuff like that. But
Right.
now that is accepted. That if you're a lifer, like if you're an experiencer, it's going to happen your whole life. You're going to have all sorts of sightings. But in the old days, it was a random thing. And so when I look at it, I'm starting to think maybe none of them are random. And so let me ask you a question. Do you think you have a mission? Do you think they picked you for something?
No, I don't think so. I don't allow that notion. Do you know what I mean? I don't allow that. That's because I don't want to bring ego into this deal, because it may not be. That may be just wishful thinking for me. You know what I mean? I know people who think that, and I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to think. I'm just, for myself, I don't think so. I don't think I'm special or anything like that. Maybe I am. Who knows? I mean, we're all special, right? We all have our talents and gifts, but I don't think I have some kind of mission on this planet to enlighten the world. I think, it may happen. Oh, I might get lucky, and maybe you and I will.
But then why would they do it?
I don't know.
Why would they do this?
That's a good question. It's not just happening to you and me; it's happening to thousands, right? So, it's sort of a collective elevation of consciousness. Now, how are those people selected, or what causes them to be part of that? Let's call it program, experiment, whatever you want to say. It may be something genetic that was introduced long time ago. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, for example, after I got into this for many, many years, and I met Bud Hopkins, and Bud Hopkins was going on, and then finally at the end of the meeting, I pulled him aside because I was having some memories, right? I go, hey Bud, I think some of that stuff you're talking about, I might have memory of. He goes, really? I go, yeah. I was thinking, should I get a session? Should I be put under hypnosis? He goes, let me ask you something. Are you pretty well adjusted? You happy with your life? I go, yeah. He goes, you successful? You doing all right? I go, yeah. He goes, don't do it. I go, he goes, once you open that Pandora's box, you can't put those things back in there. Yeah. But that was wise advice. But what's happened?
But you mentioned already, do you have a choice? And I can bring up Bud Hopkins, for example. Most people don't know, Bud Hopkins had a sighting, clear daylight sighting in 1964. Yeah. And then when he starts the same year as me.
Daylight, right?
Yeah. Daylight and it's sitting there, and he actually goes back the next day and he retraces it. Yep. And how long did it take? And he was also there for the War of the Worlds. His parents freaked out. He was looking out the window as the War of the Worlds was going. His parents were freaking out. The neighbor comes with the guns. We're going to the top of the hill. We're going to take these things on. And then in 75, it's almost like your experience or my experience. It doesn't make any sense. It's like Bud Hopkins, is the guy that sells them the booze at the corner, says, Bud, I had this experience the other night. This UFO was about 100 feet off the road, and these little aliens got out with shovels, and they were digging holes. And Bud goes, really? And that's how it starts for Bud Hopkins. And he goes and he checks, and here's these 15 holes. Now, why are aliens digging holes? It's almost like they're dragging you in. It's like, okay, wake up time.
Because
that's
ways like that. Yeah.
You start looking at that kind of stuff. Because for me, I mean, it was like I don't know how your wife reacts, but with me, I had other people in the car when I had two sightings 2 days apart, pretty close up. And I had no interest in UFOs. They'd only gone out there because everybody else in the town was seeing this thing. I said, let's go look what we're looking at. I had no interest.
Where was this now?
This was in Carmen, Manitoba, which is about 25 miles north of the North Dakota border. Okay. And we went there, and the rest of my friends, they just went on with their life. And it was like me. It was like, man, I just fell off the edge of the earth. I mean, I could not get enough. It was almost like it was triggered. I was at university. I said, university, this is a total waste of time. Now I know what I'm going to do, because I couldn't figure out what I was doing at university. And that's this weird, when you see these sort of sightings of this whole thing about random. Is it random, or are people being woken up and triggered to do things? Or why are we so affected by the thing where, we always hear these stories like people say, oh, the guy quit. He's gone. He's never coming back. And we always go, don't worry. Nobody quits. He'll be back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back. It's in their blood. It's in our blood. I don't know. That's a lot of why I continue this journey. I don't know what this all means or what we're supposed to be doing. I do know, and I agree with you, that this has to do with consciousness, not just nuts and bolts, alien guys. It has to do with the evolution of our consciousness somehow.
So when do you make that move for UPARs? Like what triggers you to say, okay, it's not UFOs, and I'm going to actually change the name of the group, and we're going to go down this other road?
That wasn't by design. If you want to know the truth, I was fired. I had a disagreement with my boss. She was getting involved in the day-to-day stuff that we were doing. At the time, we were going through a rash of sightings. And my director of field investigations was having to recruit new people. One was a detective, LAPD, and she was a detective. Another guy was just a bunch of cool people. And he was training them and sending them out, on mild cases and stuff. And then at the same time, this person who was my boss decided to insert herself in our activities after 13 years of being absentee, right?
Okay.
Because the convention, I believe, because the MUFON convention, National MUFON Convention, was going to be held here that year, and it was coming up quick in a few months, and she felt like she hadn't done anything, right? So she starts, but she was messing with these newbies, and she was writing all these strange, posts and letters, emails to them, and the guy, director of field investigations, found out about it, of course, because they're saying, who is this lady, And so he got into it with her, and then she got into it with him, and then he was copying me, so then I had to jump in and protect him.
Yeah.
And so then I got into it with her, and finally it was untenable. So we said, look, we gotta go. I knew Jan Harzan was coming in August to take over MUFON International, right? So I said, I called Jan. I said, hey, Jan, look, this is the problem. Is it going to continue? She's still going to be my boss when you take over. And he said, yes. And I said, okay, then I'm out. Wow. So that's how that all went. So then, here's the interesting part about UPARS, right? So I got together with my board, and I said, look, it's over. We went to dinner. We went to DuPARS. Okay, we went to a cafe called DuPARS nearby where we meet. Yeah. And I said, look, it's the end of MUFON. I'm no longer going to be the state section director of MUFON LA. What do you guys want to do? We're done. And they're like, no, we love it. Because all these people are abductees.
Yeah.
Everybody on my board was an abductee.
Wow.
Okay? Even one guy who doesn't really realize it, doesn't want to admit it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's like typical for the makeup of our club. A lot of people who have experiences. Anyway, so we're all sitting around and let's call it something else, and then we are all coming up with names and UFOs, got to have that. But we know, but we talked about the paranormal and how it's always present in all of these things, and so we incorporated that. And then somebody said, let's add society because that sounds legit. I'm like, yeah, okay, UFO and Paranormal Research Society. So that was it. UPARS. We had no idea that we were designing the name UPARS in a place that we're eating called DuPARS. So anyway, so that's how UPARS came to be, and and we've been doing it the same way ever since. We still mostly focus on ufology because that's what we're comfortable with. But we've had people come and talk about Bigfoot. We've had people talk about ghosts. Barry Taft. We've had somebody come and give a presentation on 9/11. Yeah. Richard, can't remember his last name, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I apologize for that, Richard. Anyway, which is appropriate today. Exactly. Yeah, here's a little story. So when I first got into the business and took over and had the sighting, and then, that was in May. And then in September, 9/11 happened. Okay. And I didn't have anything to do with conspiracies. Never even thought about that stuff, right? So then I go to a convention in San Jose that February about ufology and stuff, and I meet Jim Mars, and he gives a talk, and then at the end of it, I want to talk to him. So I wait my turn, and then I talk to him, and most of the people had gone away, and he started talking about conspiracies, and he brought up 9/11. I go, what do you mean? He goes, oh, it's perfectly feasible that NASA's been able to fly jets remotely. Since the 70s, and you could fly one into a building. He started going to the conspiracy of it. Yeah. And I thought to myself, this guy's crazy. He's saying that the United States government is somehow involved in this. I'm thinking, what have I gotten myself into? These people are crazy, right?
Yeah.
But and then I of course I had read one or two of his books, or I read Alien Agenda. Thank you. Good book. Yeah, and then Rule by Secrecy. That was the other one I read. And then I've read his other books too, the one about the Third Reich and all that. I just enjoyed his books, but I was like, man, this dude's crazy. But no, as you dig into it, you realize, there were people within our government who knew that was going to go down. And, that's just, it's a terrible thing to think about, really.
Including experiencers. I think I got a list of 6 or 7 experiencers who knew 9/11 was going to happen. That they're abductees, but they got the vision the night before. And the visions were all different, but they were all sort of the same. Like one was 2 communications towers on fire, and one was a building in Georgia where he phoned his girlfriend, get out of the building, the building's going to come down, and stuff like that. This guy never worked again. I mean, after this happened, he never, ever could work. He was totally devastated. Wow. So that's where this paranormal phenomena comes in, that a lot of experiences seem to pick up on this, that something was about to happen. Yeah,
it's common for experiencers to have precognition, to be, have a little more ESP ability than the normal person. And I don't know why that is. It has something to do with the left brain, I guess. We could go there. But I have noticed that experiencers tend to be psychic in some way. You know what I mean?
Like consciousness. Like, talk about the one. I want to make sure we get this in. Two more stories in before you do. Tell us a story about the contact experience, because I actually want to use this when you tell the story. This
we're talking about contact in the desert. Contact in the desert.
The one with the triangle where these objects where they're flashing and stuff.
Yeah. So this is 3 years ago. Contact in the desert. When it was over there, Joshua Tree Retreat Center.
Yeah.
And it's Friday night. I think it was Friday night. And I just got done with Jimmy Church's radio show. He has all the speakers come and talk, and I'd been on for a few minutes, and then I'm coming out of the room, and one of my friends comes up to me and goes, "Hey, man, you want to come see some UFOs?" I go, "What?" Yeah. They got the night vision goggles out. Let's go. Come on. They've seen a bunch. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking, they've seen 3 or 4. This is cool. Sure, because I've been out to Joshua Tree before that, and I'd seen UFOs on my own, right? We've done sky watches out there, so I knew they're out there. I'd seen them before. But like, okay. So we go over there, and there are all these people with night vision goggles, and there's one little group that he drags me over to. And one guy's got a laser pointer, one guy's got a clipboard and night vision goggles, and another guy's got night vision goggles. And like, there's one, and the guy's like putting a little hash mark, right? And then the guy with the night vision goggles describing it and stuff. I go, bullshit, give me a break. You guys aren't seeing UFOs. I go, how many have you seen? He goes, 84. I just like, what a bunch of, airplanes. They're seeing airplanes, So he goes, no, put them on. So he takes the night vision goggles off his head and puts them on me, right? And then this other guy with night vision goggles on goes, there's one. And the other guy shines a laser on it. I look at the laser, and it's right on a flying Dorito. It was triangular in shape, but like a Dorito, a little more, acute. And it had little lights on it, but it was an object, not just little twinkly lights. And I was like, holy shit. Holy shit, these guys are legitimate. Yeah. So, and they just continued on. I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. Thanks. I took them off, gave them back, and I was like, oh, my God, this is crazy, Yeah. And, they had sightings last year and the year before that.
So what happened last year? You were they were in Palm Springs. So did you have sightings in Palm Springs?
I didn't go to the skywatch in Palm Springs.
Yeah. Okay.
I was busy with OnStellar and all that stuff, and got tied up with that. I didn't have time to go out. And I've seen UFOs quite a few times out there in the desert, so it's like nothing new.
Yeah.
I went out to eceti Ranch about a month ago with my wife, and we went for a Soul Tech conference with Jimmy Church and his group.
Yeah.
It was great. It was great. And of course, at the eceti Ranch in Trout Lake, Washington, James Gilliland's ranch.
Yeah. I've been there. Yeah, last year.
Yeah. So and very pleasant, very nice out there. The weather was beautiful. We'd sit out there and look at the stars, and we saw so many UFOs flying over in 2s and 3s, reversing direction. It was just like every 5 minutes. After a while, it gets boring. You're just like, oh man, it's 11 o'clock. I gotta go to bed. These guys are going on their way. I don't know what they're up to, but.
Tell the story. You had the one at 2 o'clock in the morning where you pick up the object where it's flashing.
Oh, okay. This was the first time I'd gone to Joshua Tree. So okay. So now this is important because I call them strange attractors. There are certain people who kind of pull the phenomenon in, and I kind of
people
feel like
don't realize that. I think people really think you always hear of Stephen Greer and stuff. And I know we'd flash lights at the objects we were seeing back in the 70s. And I always said when people get critical about, nothing happens, these crazy people with lights and stuff, I said, don't knock it until you've tried it.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell a similar story that this stuff actually does go on.
Yeah, no. So we're at a skywatch. So Sandra Marsh was one of the board members of MUFON at the time. This is back in, I think, 2003 or 2004.
Yeah.
And she used to go to the desert on her own, or sometimes she'd take a buddy of hers, and they'd go out there, and she would do field research almost every week out there in the desert in the dirt. Very, very pretty lady, very charming, very classy. Dressed well, but she'd go out in the desert in the dirt and just sit there overnight. She was an abductee. Yeah. And beyond that, they did a lot of stuff to her. But anyway, so she had strong psychic ability and all this stuff. Anyway, so I finally convinced her to lead a group, a MUFON group, out to the desert and do some sky watching. So we did. We went out there, and you're standing on the top of this little mound in the middle of nowhere with your head cranked up, staring at the stars all night. You're just staring. You might be sitting down, you might be standing up. I'm standing up most of the night. And she kept saying, "They're right there. They're right there. The ship is parked right there." And she kept pointing to this one little area of the sky. And she goes, "They're watching us. They're watching us. And I just want them to do something." And this went on all night. And I'm getting tired. It's about 2:30, 3 o'clock, about 2:30 in the morning. And the guy next to me goes, "Ooh, I got flashed." And I go, "What?" He goes, "I got flashed." And he's got this little LED light. One of those little LED lights you use to light up your keyhole when you're going to open your house, right? I go, "Give it a flash." He gives it a flash, and the thing flashes back. And I'm like, "Holy shit!" I go, "Give it 2." And he goes, "1, 2," and the thing goes 1, 2, and it's a star. It had been there all night, staring at us, and it was in the spot where Sandra said they were there, right? I go, and now my voice is going up and I'm getting louder and everybody's like looking like what's going on. I go, "Give it 3, give it 3." And it gives it 3 and it gives us 3 back. And then everybody's like, "Whoa!" Everybody starts screaming and stuff. And I was afraid they were going to wake up the little Cub Scout troop that was down there camping. Everybody's getting loud. And then this thing, after it gave us the 3, it got real bright. All of a sudden, it turned up the volume times 100. It got in other words, it looked like it was coming down. It was so bright. It just got big, Looked like it was coming down on us. And then everybody's like screaming, and some people are like upset, and some people are like, take me, yeah. And exhilarated. And then the thing, as we got really loud, it went back down to a little point of light. And then it moved across the sky, maybe about 90-degree arc, and joined up with 2 other lights that had been sitting there all night and made a perfect triangle. And then the 3 of them rotated about an axis. They rotated about an axis. And as they rotated, they kind of got smaller or closer together and diminished in visibility. They just got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer as they're rotating, and then they're just gone. And that was my first, controlled sighting where we actually went out to look for that.
Wow. So we got a couple minutes left. A couple things I want to go down. So we're talking about the communication, there's this mental aspect, this consciousness aspect. I spoke to your group, and then I went the next night to Orange County. I spoke to them, and this Robert guy. You ever talk to this? He's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. Flew F-16s.
No.
He's telling me, he says, "Oh, I had this dream." I was talking about flying the craft. I don't know if I talked about flying the craft at your place.
Yes, you did.
We were flying the craft. And then they said, Robert, he wasn't at the lecture. He said, "Robert, you should have been at the lecture. Grant was talking about flying the craft. Tell him about your dream." And then he says, "It was just a dream." I said, "Oh, everybody says it's a dream." And he said, "Oh," I said, "You fly planes?" And he went on. I said, "F-16s? Sit down and tell me a story." And he tells exactly the same story. Have you had any of those kind of encounters where people are sort of talking about the ship being alive or flying the ship, or the ship is bigger on the inside or the out?
Bigger on the inside, I've heard. I've never spoken to anybody directly who's flown the craft. Oftentimes they always say, everybody always says that they couldn't identify where the light was coming from when they're inside. The ship is lit, but they can't explain how. You know what I mean? They don't see any obvious lights. It's like the whole thing. And oftentimes they'll say that the ship kind of felt like it was alive, like it was some kind of being itself. You know what I mean? That's not as common. That's not as commonly reported, but I think it's because they can't quite put that into context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but I've never spoken to anybody directly, except for people who have come to speak. That has said, none of my subjects, none of my people that I've interviewed have said that they piloted a craft. I can't say that I have. No.
A lot of the big stuff going on now is this thing about the metals. They're recovering all these little pieces of metals. Have you had any interaction, people coming with little pieces of metal or claiming this kind of stuff, or implants and stuff like that? And what do you think about all that?
Implants are common. That's obviously part of what's happening, and I think implants are real, of course, because I've seen them, I've touched them. I know they move around on people, and that's bizarre. And as far as metals, I can't really speak. I can say that someone who you know is a speaker, and she, maybe I'm giving away too much there. She was given a piece of metal that a long time ago from somebody who had allegedly visited a crash site when he was a little boy, and when he was in his 80s, he passed it on to her. It's quite large piece. And that piece is going to be put in fact, this month, she's going to meet with Jacques Vallée. And I don't know if you remember, but Jacques Vallée has a lab up near Stanford somewhere where he does metallurgy. He tests these things. So he's going to test it and see what's what.
Okay, we'll see where it goes. I'm getting the signal to cut off here. And
I see that,
fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Let's do it again. And when I'm in LA, in another month. Let's get together and have coffee.
I'd love to, Grant. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. You're wonderful. Thanks.
You too. Thanks.
Back to you, Bill.
You've been listening to the Cameron Files with Grant Cameron. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or program content without express written permission from the KGRA DB is strictly prohibited. The Cameron Files.